Ok.
This is just something.
Right, ragazzi. Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to everybody. So it's a pleasure to have you for this first session of the luxury talks. A few weeks ago, we had an idea with the other program directors of other masters in luxury management to share some information and some news about what is happening in this moment. So IUM today is the first university in welcoming all of you, and then week after week we will have more speakers, more topics, and then more live sessions like this. So today I have the great pleasure to welcome our first guest speaker, and our guest speaker who is already with us, Bertrand Petyt. Actually, Mr. Bertrand Petyt is very close to what we do at IUM because he's one adjunct professor in for the luxury hospitality specialization. But he also has two different hats, and so one is the founder of Vitruvius consultancy company, and then he's also the COO of the Parkview collection company. So Bertrand, I give you the word, and then stage is yours, and then enjoy. We listen to you.
Super, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Annalisa, and thank you for the International University of Monaco for this fantastic initiative, and I'm very pleased to share this few minutes with you today. So we are going to talk today about how the current pandemic affects the perception of luxury. And let me begin with a little bit of historical data. You know, luxury is hard to define because it's very relative in a sense, and it's intrinsically subjective and fleeting. And for example, if you look in the ancient Egyptian times, luxury at that time was ostrich eggs and feathers. If you were able to, you know, have feathers in your household and eat ostrich eggs, it was considered to be the ultimate luxury. Now, a little bit later in ancient Athens, for example, the best definition, the best barometer for luxury was actually whether you could actually afford to go to the fish market. Buying fish was considered to be luxury, especially certain types of fish, such as eel. So you see that with time, luxury, or the perception of luxury, changes. And we see that an event such as the current pandemic also has the potential to deeply, deeply transform the paradigms of luxury, how we perceive luxury, what is luxury. Now, I don't know if you, I hope everybody can see the presentation. I'll try to go on the next page. Annalisa, it doesn't work. Annalisa, it doesn't work to go to the next page, sorry. Maybe you take control and I'll tell you. Voila. So Annalisa will take control of the presentation for me. So in a sense, I call also this little venture that we are going, this little story that we're going to share today as the search for purpose in a post-COVID world. So if you go to the next slide, something interesting. Annalisa, if you go to the next slide. Right. Something interesting. Let's look at two aspects of luxury. First, in 2019, the majority of the growth in the luxury consumption came from China. And it's actually expected, or it was expected, it may change now, but it was expected that by 2025, 50% of luxury consumption would come from China. Interestingly enough, the COVID-19 attacked China first, attacked the country where there was the most potential for growth in the luxury market. So I don't know if the virus knew about that, but it obviously attacked the country where there was the most potential of growth. So that's already a change in paradigm. But interestingly enough, Italy actually accounts for a large portion of luxury items production. So you see that even from the second, and Italy, if I think we all know that, unfortunately, Italy was actually the second country that was really hit by the pandemic. I don't know if you can go back to that slide, Annalisa. I don't know why. Voilà. So Italy was actually the second hit by the pandemic. So it seems the virus really made it a purpose to hit the luxury market, both from a demand perspective by going to China and from a production perspective by going to Italy. So you see that there is a change in paradigm on both ends of the spectrum, both from the consumption standpoint as well as from the production standpoint. And that tells us that the transformation will be very deep indeed. Now, if we go to the next slide, Annalisa. Now, a little fun thing, in the past few weeks, we've all been quarantined. We've all been sort of, forced to stay in our homes. And that changed a little bit our perception of what is really a luxury item, because in a weird way, in the past few weeks, luxury items were really about mask. Getting masked was really a necessity, and it was considered to be a luxury. The gel, the gloves. So again, it shows that with a pandemic such as the one that happens now, it may completely change our priorities, including how we perceive luxury. Now, if we go on to the next slide. A little fun slide now, but obviously it doesn't mean, we know that, for example, Louis Vuitton, LVMH started to produce hydroalcoholic gel. You see Hermes, who started to produce gloves. Well, I'm not saying that these are going to be luxury items, obviously, but again, it shows you that there's a difference in paradigm. If we go to the next slide. Now, why does it change people's perception? First of all, this pandemic had a very important impact on the higher spenders' perception of their wealth. So when you look at your own wealth, where you stand in terms of your wealth, it will also change your priorities in terms of what you define as luxury. People no longer feel comfortable spending high amounts of money on goods and services that are not strictly necessary, and that's also a change of paradigm. Now we're going to look at what is the meaning in terms of necessity of what I'm buying. And we estimate, it's just an estimation, it will vary a lot because we're not sure yet. There are many things that we don't understand about this pandemic, but so far it is estimated that this pandemic has cost the luxury industry about 50 billion drops in sales in a couple of months. Obviously, the industry will be back. There's no question about this. The real question is in what form and with what new paradigms. Now, if we go to the next slide, I'd like to cover a little bit of this. So luxury was never rational reasoning, right? Luxury was always based on emotions, on feelings, and that will stay. That will never disappear. However, in the future, what we can expect in the very near future, actually, is that now luxury will be based also on two parameters that are very important. Security. I think to integrate the parameter of security, safety, health is very important. People have gone through dramatic times, and they will view security as part of luxury. And I'm going to give you an example. People who used to maybe go into prestigious hotels, now they're going to say, well, no, I don't really want to go into a hotel. I might prefer a private villa. So that's a switch because private villa ensures allegedly a better level of security. Now, the second parameter that is important as well is identity. And identity in terms of luxury is not anymore, or will not be anymore, about showing off, about being part of an elite. It's more about myself now. It's more about how does that purchase, that luxury purchase, reflect who I am? How does it reveal something about me to either myself or to others? And that's why the companies or brands, and see I list four very important keywords here. Brands will now have to focus much more on that identity part by telling stories, by showing their heritage. Do I connect with that heritage? Is there authenticity and meaning into what I produce and what I sell? And we'll see that. I'm reserving those little to the last slide because I go deep into this in a few minutes. Now, something that is also specific to the luxury leisure segment. If you consider a hotel, now a few years back, hotels were selling a room, right? So if you look at the branding, at the marketing, it was all about come to my hotel, you will find a nice bed, you will find nice food, you will find, it was focusing on the hardware in a way. Then we had a shift in the past, I would say 10 years, towards more the experience. So that was more about, of course, the hardware is important, it's a given. Now it will be about what are you going to experience in my hotel? So staying within the parameters of what I can produce as a hotel company. I believe that we are going now to experience a transformation, which is partly due to the pandemic. Not only, I think the pandemic is just accelerating that situation, but now we will move from experience to exploration. And exploration means it's not just about what I give you in my hotel. It's not just about experiencing my brand, experiencing my hotel, but now if you see, and that's why I want to show you a small video at the end. Now it's also about, because you will stay in my hotel, you will be able to explore. So it's not just about the hotel anymore, it's about your experience outside of the hotel, it's about exploration. The market already saw that very much. And to give you an example, in the cruising sector, well, right now the cruising sector is obviously going through a dramatic time, and all the cruise ships are docked with empty of guests for at least a few months. I think it may last until the end of the year. But 5 years ago or 6 years ago, there were only about 10 exploration cruise ships. This year, in 2020, we estimate that there are about 60 of them. So that was the market that was really booming. Why? Because people now, they just don't want to experience. Experiencing is a very passive gesture. You know, I'm just sitting here, I'm experiencing something. It's very passive, whereas exploration is much more active. I get involved. I want to, of course, part of it is experience, but I want to explore. I want to understand. I want to see something different. I want to challenge myself. And I think the pandemic will strengthen that feeling of I want to explore the environment. And I think brands will need to really adjust to that. And I think they are in a big time. If we go to the next slide. Sorry. So here I just, again, consumption is driven by motivation as emotion, identity, and social connection. That stays, that will certainly not disappear. But we'll see now how, you know, values, habits, and norms that shape what we consume will actually shift dramatically. So if we move to the next slide. Before we go to that, I want to give you a little perspective of what is expected to happen in 2021 and beyond. And I think the graph is pretty self-explanatory. You see, obviously, we had, due to the pandemic, a sharp drop in the luxury market. And it is expected that countries such as China or other countries in Asia, Japan, will rebound rather quickly. Or when I say rather quickly, is we anticipate not in 2020 for sure, but in 2020. Whereas other countries such as Americas and Europe will probably dip and stabilize. So the market is not expected in those countries to go back to the levels that we have experienced in 2018 and 2019. It will in China and Asia overall. It will not in Europe and Americas. And we have to understand that, to understand what it means for the customer. So if we move to the next slide, Annalisa. So more of China, we can expect more of China. Obviously, China will probably be the first one to reopen if obviously the virus is under control. So we'll probably see China. I mentioned earlier that China was expected to account for about 50% of luxury purchases by 2025. It may happen. That's still pretty much a target. The number two is obviously we'll see more of a shift to digitalization. And we've been forced in the past few weeks to obviously use much more the technology, work remotely and adjust to working online and shopping online and doing everything online. That will stay. But we know also that consumers will want to return to physical stores. They still want that. They still will have this habit to return to physical stores. Yet I expect that digitalization will play a big part. Ethics will also become very important and as important as aesthetics. So now consumers will want to understand what is behind the brand. We'll talk in the next few slides about transparency, but I want to understand that what I'm buying it has ethical values as well as aesthetical values. I want to understand that how it's being produced, and so on and so forth. If we go to the next slide. So the heightened environmental and social consciousness. So consumers also, obviously, this is a trend that happened before, but it will increase because of the pandemic. People are going to be very, very conscious about social issues, about sustainability, and they're going to ask brands to rethink the end-to-end product life cycle. They're going to ask brands to be conscious about this as well, and they're not going to accept waste, for example, or impact on the earth. Another point that is quite interesting, strengthened local pride. Now we've seen in the past few weeks that because of the pandemic, there's been sometimes stigmatization of certain nations and triggering some sort of conflicts, and we're going to need to be very careful as brands to avoid inflaming these local sensitivities. So there's going to be also adjustment to that, in a sense. We need to be very aware of, whereas before we would come as a brand and the brand would sort of, be accepted everywhere. Now we have to be aware of local sensitivities and make sure that we don't trigger inflaming the tensions that have been created during the pandemic. Expanding need for inclusion. Now, obviously, brands will need to use all their ingenuity to revamp their offer at accessible price points. We need to change probably the way we price our products, the way we perceive value. I think the concept of value will be much more ingrained into the consumer's mind. If you go to the next page. Now here, a few words, and I highlighted them in red. So again, what will the consumer want now? Obviously, I want to connect with the real world and find real purpose. And that's something that luxury didn't necessarily offer before. It was sort of disconnected. So that's actually good news, because there's part of luxury that's based, in my opinion, on artisan craftsmanship. And that's about the real world. That's about real purpose, And I think craftsmanship, people that are able to show that the value of hard work, the value of service into their product will certainly offer that connectivity to the real world, Happiness, and again, beyond material satisfaction from brands. I'm not saying I'm happy to wear a piece of jewelry, but I think now brands will need to focus much more on how can I make you happy from a very genuine, from a very deep level. And it's not about possessing items, possessing assets, or again, being able to sort of show off. It's a much more deep value in terms of how does that purchase or that experience in a hotel make me happy. Now, luxury will be much less a clear-cut status symbol. We've mentioned that before. And again, it will be a way to express ourselves. And that's what I said at the beginning when I said it's all about identity. I want to make sure now, if I engage into a luxury purchase, I want to make sure that it's a way to express who I am. And I expect the brand to allow for that, to actually reach to my level and reach to my values and allow myself to express my own values. And so to do that, obviously luxury brands will have to focus really around storytelling, around purpose, values, heritage, authenticity. And these are the words that, in my opinion, will come now very often in terms of when we talk about luxury. If we go to the next slide, Annalisa. One particularly interesting development in the luxury is the new luxury of health and well-being, especially in the leisure sector. We know that what we went through and what we probably will go through in the next few months or possibly years has been quite traumatic. It has changed our minds. It has changed our perception. I mean, you know, who knew at the beginning of this year, if you would have told me, Bertrand, you will be confined into your apartment, not allowed to leave your apartment because otherwise you'll catch a deadly virus, I would have told you you're crazy. You know, that will never happen. Yet, you know, here we are. And so it affects our emotional wellness. It affects us from a very deep health and well-being aspect. So I think the focus on health and well-being, mental, emotional wellness will be part of how we perceive luxury. Luxury needs to cater for that as well. I would want to pursue activities, lifestyle that lead to a very holistic well-being state of mind. And I think especially in the leisure industry, you will see a lot of brands that start to integrate those messages into their marketing or into their products. And I put something that's interesting in that is luxury is obviously the journey, not the goal anymore. And it's not to acquire something, but it's more, all right, the journey, the exploration again, we use that word. If we move to the next slide. And here I wanted to show you a little bit some transformation that luxury brands may want to consider in the next few years. First, I think we need to go from the concept of waste to obviously a concept of sustainability. When I say waste, I'm not just talking about obviously pollution, it's part of it, but also, you know, well, what is the beginning to end life cycle of a product? You know, if I buy, and consumers will want to be aware of that. You know, what happens to my product once I don't want it anymore? If I don't buy it, you know, what happens to the product? What do you do with your products? And I think consumers will look into that. You know, they will not accept that there is any waste into either the production or into what happens with the product once it is either pre-sold, not sold, or even after it's sold. So I think the transformation from waste to sustainability will be very important. Deception to authenticity. We do live in a world that, not just from a luxury standpoint, but we live in a world that is very deceptive at times. And I think people will want more clarity, more authenticity. That's a good news for the luxury market because, again, we go back to craftsmanship. You know, an artisan, what is an artisan? An artisan is someone who has a specific skill, who has authenticity by essence. And I think brands need to go back to that concept of, I am an artisan, I have craftsmanship. And this is what I put into my product. And not about deception, where you don't know where your product was manufactured, you don't know who manufactured your product, and that will not be accepted anymore. Going from opacity to transparency is also very important. So it is interesting from brands that we tend to, no, we don't want you to know we're a black box, you know, sort of operating as a black box. All you need to know is, you know, this is what we give you. That doesn't work anymore. Again, people will want to know, well, I want to open that black box. I want to understand what is in that black box. What is your skill? Where do you source your product? Where do you source your materials? If you go into a hotel and you go into the restaurant, today, guests will probably want to know, where did you source the raw items that you use in the kitchen? You know, I want to make sure there's traceability. I want to make sure I understand how you produce them, how you transform, everything about that black box. The concept of a black box, which sort of gave in the past the aura and the mystery of luxury companies, disappears. Now we want to understand, to open that black box and understand. This connection to connectivity. I think also it's, and I will put disconnection, connectivity, and narration and conversation on the same level. We want now to have a discussion. It was earlier, the situation was, well, I produce, and you come into my shop, you see what I can offer you, and either you buy it or you don't buy it. There is no connection. There is no connectivity. You don't engage me on a value level, on a human level. I think we integrate the human element here. There's something interesting. Sébastien Bazin, the CEO of Accor, the Accor Group, one of the largest hotel management companies in the world, said, well, it's interesting because I connect with my guests about 3 to 4 times per year on average, which is only when they come into my hotel. And that's my only point of connection. Now, other companies connect with their guests in some ways 8,000 times per year, you know, constantly. And that's why they developed the concept of all Accor Live Limitless, because they say we need to connect with our guests, not just when they're in the hotel, but also to give them, to share that authenticity, that storytelling in a sense. And so you will see a lot of initiatives, and the Accor Live Limitless initiative in the hospitality industry is huge, and it just happened in January, so just before the pandemic, but it's huge because it will increase the connectivity. I want to feel connected, and not just because I'm going to buy from you, but because I want to be included and interested in what you can tell me. And the same from narration to conversation. Before, you know, companies will tell you just their story, whereas now it's going to be interesting to have an exchange, and that can be reached through that connectivity. I want to understand you're part of the story. The story is not just me as a luxury provider. The story is us together, and there is that need for a conversation. As a consumer, I want to be part of that conversation. I want to be connected to you. So those two, connectivity and conversation, I put them together, but you will see, I put them last here, but in my opinion, they're maybe the least obvious, but the most important ones. If we move to the next slide. Alors, this is where, I don't know if we're going to be able to see the brief video, Annalisa, if we can see the video I sent you. Alors, while Annalisa is setting up the video, the reason why I wanted to show you this video is, again, it was created very recently, a few months ago, by Accor, the Accor Group. And listen carefully. It's not just about luxury, although we know that Accor invested heavily in luxury in the past few years. But listen carefully to the messages. I found the messages in that video extremely relevant to everything that we've said now in terms of storytelling, in terms of connectivity, in terms of authenticity. These are all in terms of also well-being. It's very important. So I thought that this brief video was very, very powerful in passing on, in carrying these messages. So I don't know if we can see the video, Annalisa? Hopefully.
I'm trying, but I can maybe from dalla regia si riesce, because actually I'm not able to launch it.
No, non si può. Non si può.
We cannot. No, the phone doesn't work.
Cannot? Oh, okay. Well, then what? It doesn't matter. What you can do is at a later stage. It's just to illustrate what I've said anyway. But at a later stage, I really invite you to go maybe on YouTube, and we can go back to the presentation. Then you can go on my last page. But I invite you to go back on YouTube, and you just enter Accor Live Limitless. It's a 3-minute video. It's very short, but it's quite powerful in carrying those messages. So please do so after at your own pace. Maybe Annalisa, we can go back to the presentation.
Ragazzi, potete tornare indietro di una pagina? I don't have.
Voilà, that's it. Well, anyway, no, go to the last page. Okay, that's it. So I wanted to thank you. So you see here how you can contact me. I guess we'll have an exchange now, maybe with question and answers. You can also go, Byte Reviews, as Annalisa mentioned, is a new venture that we're setting up in consultancy for the leisure industry mostly. And you can see, you can reach us through the website, which will be live very soon. It's not live, completely live now, but otherwise go on YouTube, enter Byte Reviews Partners Group. And if you're interested, you can keep in touch with us and connect with us. So thank you very much. Annalisa, I don't know if you want to open to questions or an exchange with the audience.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Me, yes.
Okay. So guys, if you want to see that, if you have any questions, first of all, Bertrand, thank you so much. There are many interesting aspects that I personally really enjoyed. I'm so new to Teams that actually I don't know where I can see the questions, if there are questions. I have no idea.
Maybe on the little, if you click here, conversation, no?
On the chat?
Maybe I suggest if you have questions, you enter them into conversation, and Annalisa, you're able to read the questions, and then I can answer them.
Yes.
That might be the best way.
Control, actually. I don't know. I don't see any questions, but actually I have one. Actually, just to start, because actually you mentioned there is in your slide when you are talking about the shift in the paradigm. Actually, now we have to look more from more authenticity, and actually you were giving some ideas and some little examples about how the luxury hospitality industry can react to these. Can you give more additional examples on actually, because I think this is the most interesting and then maybe difficult, challenging shift. Actually, how brands can be more authentic than before.
Yeah. Well, you look at, actually it's a trend that, to be honest, started even before the pandemic. But look, let me give an example. A few months ago. Again, Sébastien Bazin, the CEO of Accor, was interviewed by I think the Financial Times. And today Accor has I think 25 or 26 different brands, right? Which seems like a lot. They purchase a lot of different brands. And the interviewer was asking Sébastien Bazin, well, why aren't you consolidating? Why do you have all those brands? You know, and do you expect that there will be a consolidation of brands, that you will simplify things? And I found his answer extremely inspiring, because he said, not at all. On the contrary. On the contrary, we want to expand the brand portfolio, because now it's about really finding each item. For example, when they invested in Mama Shelter, you know, their policy now is we only co-invest. We don't fully own the company because we want to let the people run the company. And Mama Shelter has a specific approach to hospitality that we would never think of. For example, in Mama Shelter, you can be greeted by people that have no hospitality experience, that have tattoos, that don't have a uniform, that don't come from a hotel school. And he said, me, as a hotelier, I would never have hired those people before. But it's a shift of paradigm, because now we need to be authentic. We need to make sure that guests and staff can relate. You know, it's not just, oh, there's a big front desk in between us and we don't relate. And I'm trained as a hotelier. You're a guest. We don't relate. I just give you a service. No, now it's more about, well, each brand will have to find ways, such as Mama Shelter, by saying, well, you know, come as you are, as a crew member, as a staff. You don't need a uniform. You can have tattoos. You don't need to be educated. You understand your guests. You live the guests the same life as your guests. So you relate to them. And then the soft skills, you know what? I'll train you on that. This is not a problem. So that's what it means to be authentic. Look also at Virgin Cruises. Virgin. Well, too bad for them, you know. Sir Richard Branson launched a cruise line. He had the idea of launching a cruise line for 20 years now. But investing in the cruise line is a very capital-intensive venture, so it took him a long time. He succeeded in February in launching his very first cruise ship. and the Scarlet Lady. The Scarlet Lady left Italy, where it was built, went to Florida, and when it arrived in Florida, the pandemic stopped all cruise operations. But look what he did in terms of being authentic. He said, I don't want to do things the way cruise lines do things. I don't want to hire people that have experience in cruise lines. Actually, well, unless except for the captain and the people who drive the boat, obviously. But I don't want people that have worked on ships before. I want people that live the life of the guest that will come on board. So again, there is connectivity on the same level. It's not you're the guest, I'm the staff, or I'm the staff, you're the guest. I'm living your life. I understand your life. Therefore, I'm able to understand your needs when you're staying on my ship or in my hotel. And I think Virgin Cruises or Virgin Voyages and Mama Shelter are excellent examples of that strive for connectivity and authenticity.
Bertrand, there are some other questions for you. Hi, it's Federica. And there's one question from Lena who asks, do you see new business models rising from this situation?
Say again, sorry, Federica.
Do you see new business models rising from this situation?
Yeah. Well, look, at different levels, actually. Yeah. Let's go back to the way we work. This pandemic has changed and will change even more profoundly the way we work. So, talking, and I'll come to the business model after, but companies now, for example, this afternoon I had a discussion in my own company in terms of, well, how do we work together now? Do we all go back to the office? And we came to the conclusion that, you know what? No, because now we found a new way of working. So we also talked a few minutes ago about, the need for authenticity, connectivity, and things like this. So yes, the business models, I think it will transform. This pandemic has the potential to transform entirely the way we work and what we offer. And therefore, they may be, and this is where I see opportunities. I tend to be optimistic, hopefully, but I see the companies and the individuals that will succeed in this market are the companies that will be able to find those business models, those new ways of either working or the new products that will be of interest for our clients. And I think it's one thing that we'll need to consider in business models. The main word today will be flexibility. If you're not able to show flexibility today in the business model, in the way you operate, you are probably doomed. And it's better to fail fast. This is going to be a weird. It's better to fail fast than to succeed in the long term. You better fail fast and fail and fail and fail than someone who's going to do, because it shows a different level of flexibility. And I think flexibility in your business model will be key. So I don't know. I mean, after that, I cannot tell you what the new IDs in the leisure market will be. I mean, I have a few. For me, I strongly believe that, we go back to authenticity. For example, I talk about the cruise ships. Let's talk about the cruise ship industry. I love the cruise ship industry. Those huge cruise ships, with sometimes 6,000 guests on board. They will always be there, but the growth will not be there. The growth will be more in the smaller market, in the luxury market, in the expedition. We talked about expedition before, in anything that's authentic, going to places where, with a small boat. And now the majority of the growth in the cruise ship industry will be for boats under 400 passengers, which is considered to be a small cruise ship. So yeah, again, going back to authenticity, going back to exploration, going back to very flexible.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we have another question from Thomas, who asks, what are your feelings on business travel or hotel stays?
In what? Alors, it's business travel and hotel. Alors, it's true. Right now, we're in a situation where we're basically at a standstill. So, if you ask the people in the travel, look, I mean, Air France, for example, only has about 4% of their flights operating today. So, business travel has stopped. You know, today it's stopped. I think we will also find ways. You know, in the past few years, the development of the airline industry was mostly based on business travel. Let's face it, it's the majority of their business is on business travel. It will be reduced because also this pandemic has given us the opportunity or the vision, the clarity to see that there are different ways that we can work together. You know, and we found, you know, that wait, I can be much more efficient. You know, it's interesting. We were talking also about, you know, should we meet back in the office? And well, we're actually fine. We're actually very efficient in the way we work today. So it will probably change. I think I expect aside from the current standstill, and that's a different. But once the pandemic is over, I don't expect. This is a personal opinion, but I don't expect that business travel will go back to 2019, 2018 levels because people will have found different ways of working together, you know. And yes, the human touch is always important. I think it's always, for example, I take from myself, I want to see my colleagues, you know, I want to sit down with my colleagues. But we have other ways to work together as well. And they're very efficient. And I think people will, again, focus on flexibility, efficiency. So they'll say, no, I don't necessarily need to fly to New York just to see you for a few hours and come back, which is something that we would do without even thinking about in 2018 or 19. I think people will think twice now. But I think the market for business travel will probably be affected. It will take years to go back to any sense of normality. Not normalcy, but again, people will work differently.
Okay, very much. And from Rome, they ask you, when you mention about expanding inclusion, did you mean that luxury brand would cater to the less affluent sections of the society?
Alors, not necessarily. Yeah, it's a good question. Not necessarily. What I mean is, I was more putting this under the perspective of value. I think people will have a heightened perception of value. They want value into what. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you lower the price, although you may see that, but you may see also the opposite, you know. And I would actually expect that, you know, luxury would actually sort of go the opposite. But it depends on the concept more of value. What is your value? So if you want to keep that pricing that you have, then what do you do to your product or to your service that will make sure, and we spoke about it in terms of, you know, connectivity, all the things that we mentioned before. So how do you respect, how do you integrate all of those into your product or your service so that your customer, your consumer perceives the value of your service, of your product? Does that make sense?
Thank you. So from Anna, do you believe that clients will be more focused on jewelry rather than fashion purchases, as they will consider it more safe? Same for real estate investments other than entertainment.
Alors, you remember when at the beginning, I think in one of the slides, I spoke about the concept of security, and it's true, it also extends to that. You know, in a world where my wealth has been affected or potentially affected, yes, you know, I might look at luxury more with an investment point of view. But remember also something else that I said is luxury will always be about emotions. There will always be an irrational part to luxury. I also want this to make me feel happy. Like I said, it's about happiness, and that's not about investment, unless you're happy to make an investment. But I think, yeah, you may see some people that will sort of say, well, you know, I need to be careful. I'd rather buy this rather than this because it will have more value in the long term. But I think the emotional part will take over, you know, and again, all the words that we've used today into this presentation are much more linked to, you know, the way I feel. Am I happy? You know, does that make me feel happy? And to me, that's a very strong direction that the luxury market needs to make. You know, do I make my guests truly feel happy about the purchase, whether it's an investment or not?
Okay, thank you very much. And then from Emna, she says, we say that luxury is about emotions, and who are better than human to deliver the emotions? In this pandemic period, how do you see the shift in this emotion delivery be? Do you see any digital solutions that could replace that? Thank you.
Yeah, no, very good. Well, I'm going to go back to the hospitality industry at least, because this is the market I like. Hospitality is about human. It's about, I welcome you to my home. And actually, I believe that this pandemic, but not just that, because it happened even before, it gives us an opportunity to refocus on that, to refocus on the human element. I believe that companies that will succeed are companies that will put the human element first. And it includes everything that I told you before in terms of connectivity, being able to connect with my guests. So it doesn't mean that technology will not transform the way we work. It means that we need to use technology so it makes our tasks easier. So if I don't have to spend so much time on this, then I can spend time with you and I can take care of you as a guest. And you will see that, for example, I expect that very soon, you don't need to check in into a hotel anymore. The concept of a check-in is so outdated. You know, it's time consuming, but today we have the technology to we don't need those antiquated sort of procedures that are so linked to the hospitality industry. Why do I have to make you wait in a line to check out on the last day because everybody checks out at the same time? Why do I have to give you a key? Instead of doing those things, why don't I spend time with you in welcoming you to my property, in making you explore, in telling you, you know, we talk about exploration. Well, maybe instead of making you a key or taking your money, because today we have the technology that does that, maybe I'm going to make sure that you spend a great time, not just in my hotel, but outside. I'm going to tell you about that amazing restaurant that I've experienced last week and that blew my mind away. You know, so I think that now is a good time to go back to this human element, to put value in the human element. We have the technology to change the way we work. And I think the hospitality industry is a great example because they are so sometimes stuck to their systems. You know, they believe that these are the systems, and sometimes they even say, well, this is the legal way. You know, we cannot go around that. And very often it's actually not true. So how can you use the technology to sort of put that in the back and then refocus on what is important, which is that, you know what, as authentically as possible, I'm here to take care of you.
Okay, thank you very much. And from Deborah, regarding the sustainability and transparency of brands, most brands were already starting on that path, pricing their sustainable collections higher. As it will become a norm, or at least a necessity for a brand to continue, do you really think it will be a luxury element for brands?
No, it's not a luxury element. No, a very good question. It's not a luxury element. It's not because you're sustainable or not sustainable that you have a luxury product. Actually, you know, a one-star hotel, from that matter of fact, needs to be as sustainable as a five-star hotel. So it has nothing to do with luxury. What it has to do with is because there's transparency, I have values. Remember what I said is you need to make sure you connect with my values as well. And so if I feel that there is a disconnect between what my values and the values that you promote in your company, then I'm not going to be a customer of your company. So sustainability, in a sense, is a requirement. Is something that it's a given. It will be a given if you're not. But it needs to go deeper than that. For example, when I say sustainability, I also want to understand for example, you're producing, let's say, amazing handbags. You know, I also want to understand, or to be certain that you're not using child labor. That, you know, I want to understand how you actually produce that. You know, is it sustainable for, you know, do you kill the animals for this or not? You know, and if you do, it might be okay, but at least I want to know. So that's what I mean by transparency also, is I want to know, the customer will be much more involved into knowing what is happening in that black box. And sustainability is a part of it.
With the question of sustainability in hospitality, there also comes the preconceived notion that it will affect the comfort and accessibility of certain facilities for the consumers, sorry, especially when they do not want to sacrifice either on vacation. How do convince market this segment of clientele?
Yeah, alors, you see, this is where, and when I teach at the university, I teach at the University of Monaco, as Annalisa said, and one of the things that I said to my students is always, well, there are three things that are important for a leader, but one of them, and this is the one I'd like to insist here, is creativity. I believe, you know, we now need to invent the ways to work, and sustainability is an opportunity. It's not a charge. And you know, it's interesting because very often, before we would say, well, if you implement sustainable actions, it's going to cost you more. You know, it's going to make your operation more difficult. And so there were all those sort of, you know, well, don't do it because it's going to cost me more. Don't do it; it's going to be an inconvenience and so on. It's all wrong. It's not true. This is not true. This is a paradigm that is so untrue. Because very often with the creativity, and I think, you know, we call upon the new generation to have these ideas, to be creative, to find ways that will not only respect sustainable standards, but make it much better for the operation. You know, when you eliminate plastics, yeah, initially we're saying, like, how do you do that? You know, it's impossible, you know. Yet I can tell you, not only it's possible, it can be cheaper, it can be more convenient for the guest, it can work. So creativity, human creativity, will lead us there, will give us those solutions. And on the contrary, I view this as a huge, huge opportunity.
Do you think things will be back to usual once we have vaccine available?
You think things will be back to usual when?
We will have vaccine available.
Ah. Well, let's put it this way. I hope not, but in a good way, because you see, if you look at the history of mankind, when you have events like this, you know, dramatic events like this, of course, now we're in the middle of it. We're very worried, you know, we're very scared, we're very stressed, and it's normal because there's unknown in front of us, right? But you know what? It's an opportunity to change things. The way we did things was not working in so many ways, you know, in so many ways, on so many levels. And why not take the opportunity of what's happening today to say, you know what, let's change that. Well, first we have to define what is it we want to change, you know. But obviously things were not working. You know, we have room for improvement. And let's take this as an opportunity. Let's not be scared and say, you know what, I'll make it better. Yeah. So I hope things don't go back to normal, because what is normal? I hope that things get better.
Okay, thank you. And from Jacopo, he says, thank you for the presentation, Bertrand. My question is, since customers are asking for unique one-off products, how do you believe the personalization will affect their purchasing behaviors? Do you believe made-to-measure oriented brands will be positively affected by that trend? And do you think they'll rather accept higher price due to their uniqueness?
Yeah. Now, first of all, one thing in terms of being unique and being authentic and so on and so forth, it's not going to be just about the product anymore. Remember? So it's not about the product. It's about the human element. You know, so if and I'm going to give you, I can give you two examples. One in the hospitality industry, maybe one in the retail industry, but I'll start with the hospitality. I can go into a hotel that maybe has less of the luxury perks that I would expect. But if I feel that they have true values, they're authentic, they do things differently, they're creative, and most importantly, they have this human touch, that will be luxury for me. They make me feel, again, happy, safe. They make me feel that I'm exploring something. They make me feel that I express myself, you know. And I'd rather use their services rather than, you know, maybe going to a hotel that offers a lot of perks, but doesn't connect with me on a value system, on a value level. So it's not just about the product anymore. You know, now we need to integrate the human element and everything that goes around, all the life cycle. And from the time you make a booking to actually after you come back home, you know, it's not just the product anymore. And it's the same if we go back into retail. Well, I'm not so knowledgeable about retail as I would be for hospitality, but I'm sure it's the same. You know, the whole life cycle, the whole experience from, you know, going online to going in the shop and so on and so forth will have importance as much as, again, the aesthetic of the product itself.
Okay, thank you. How should the luxury beauty industry engage with customers now?
Sorry,
how should the luxury beauty industry engage with customers now?
Yeah, very good. Alors, that's why I wanted to show you the small video of Accor, but I'm sure you guys will see it. You see, before, and I go back to that example of Accor Group, because Accor, they were retarded in terms of interacting with their guests up until last year, truly. Because again, they were saying, well, the only interaction I have with my guests is when they come in my hotel, we service them, then they leave, that's it, you know. Maybe there's a common card by email, but that's about it. Today, the interaction, which is digitalized, which is through an app, it's basically, I'm not going to try to sell you anything. I just want you to be part of an ecosystem. That is an ecosystem that I design, of course. It's an ecosystem that includes not just Accor, but a lot of different things that can benefit you, you know. And so again, I think the communication will be based not so much more on this is what I can sell, this is what I make, you know, but more on creating an ecosystem through probably digitalization. I think digitalization will play a big role in that. And you'll enter that ecosystem and you'll feel that you're part of a community. And I think community-based communication will be very important. And I think in that sense, the system, for example, that Accor developed with the Accor Living Limitless is a great example. They're going far beyond. They went from being completely retarded in terms of how they communicate with their guests to being probably at the forefront of what anybody in the hospitality does today.
Thank you. The recent talk was to slow down and move away from fast fashion systems and processes, to focus on the value of the craftsmanship and be less rushed in creating the product. Ultimately, fashion brands will be able to financially be feasible while focusing on the experience and craftsmanship to the product. Should all brands stand together in this stance?
Yeah, well, Annalisa might have more of a better answer on that, but I think yes. Take for example, I'm going to say something personal, right? Take Hermes. I love Hermes. Yeah? Hermes is all about craftsmanship. Yeah? Actually, there was an interview of the CEO of Hermes, who's a member of the family. Hermes has been a close-knit family business for a long time. Huh? And he said, well, initially, you know, we were only hiring a few craftsmen every year. You know, it was very small. Today, I think they hire, and Annalisa, you will back me up on that. He said they are hiring 300 craftsmen every year, right? 300 craftsmen every year for Hermes. And whereas, 20 years ago, it was maybe 4 or 5 per year. Alors, and after that, they train them themselves. They take actually something that I think was very interesting. He said, I'm not hiring people from other companies. I'm not hiring people that are trained. I'm actually going to villages where people know something, where people know how to use their hands, where people know that they have this sort of love for a specific craft. And I train them. And it takes a long time. It's not, in a few months, you'll be able to produce a Hermes bag, but they train them. And that, to me, and it's just Hermes. I'm sure there are other examples on a smaller magnitude, but that to me shows that, no, the contrary. There is great business, there's a business model and there's great value in going back to craftsmanship. And it shows because people demand that. Today, if I want to buy, I know if I go buy a Hermes bag, I touch it and I touch craftsmanship. I know the story behind, Right, Annalisa?
Yes, I definitely confirm. Actually, many brands have already created their own corporate academy, and then because they're struggling in finding people who are willing, especially the young generations who are willing to start in craftsmanship, they're looking for other people who may have good skills, hand skills, and then they transform them. So you perfectly described the situation, and then what Hermes is already doing, actually it is done also by other companies. And actually in May 2019, just Italy showcased certain numbers that they were presenting with Alta Gamma, so numbers, and then they mentioned just in the fashion business, companies will lack around 50,000 craft people in the next 5 years. So actually maybe because of new let's say something that cannot be, maybe that sounds very interesting, but especially the new generations who are leaving the schools now, maybe they will face some problems in finding managerial jobs. Mm-hmm. So maybe, as happened in the past, maybe these people will go back to authentic things, as you mentioned before, to real things, to real values. Because so if companies will give the right dignity to these people, to people who are creating the beautiful products all of us are selling, so the brands are selling nowadays. And then in the same time, people will understand that doing things is beautiful, is passionate, is actually they're creating objects, actually they're giving birth to objects, to goods. And in this case, it's a real, it's very passionate, because like giving birth to a baby, because whatever you're creating is your baby. So we're thinking about the real emotions in this case. Yeah. So there is a big movement behind these aspects, but I really hope that at least these great values will be back on stage in a stronger way than before.
But you see it, you're very right, and you see it even, for example, I go back to the cruise industry, sorry, but interestingly enough, I'm going to mention one, I'm allowed to mention some brands, right? Annalisa, to give an example about Seabourn. Seabourn is one of the top luxury cruise lines, right? They're considered to be 6 stars. They have smaller ships, ultra luxury. They're probably on the top, the Seabourn, Silver Sea region. They're the 3 top. Now, Seabourn was taken over a few years ago by a huge cruise company, which is called Carnival Corporation, right? Carnival is the #1 in the industry. And people used to say, because Carnival has so much power in the cruise industry, that they have so much cash, they just buy cruise lines, buy them, and they just keep the brand of the cruise line, but everything else is transformed about the cruise line, and they call it the carnivalization of cruise lines. So when they take over a cruise line, it's very well known today that if you're taken over by Carnival Cruise Lines, you will be carnivalized, right? And everything goes into a carnival system. So Seabourn went through that process, and initially they were carnivalized, right? They went through a stage of carnivalization, which was a little bit painful for a small luxury cruise line, you know, like at the antipode of what Carnival does. But in the past 2 years, there's been a huge shift. All of a sudden, Carnival said, no, we leave you alone. You know, we don't decide what place to buy. We don't decide, and they gave the power back to the people on board, to the managers for Carnival of Seabourn. And for example, there's a good example. I was on the Seabourn cruise last September, and they had implemented a new food and beverage concept, and they went to the total authenticity, but at the level that there was no standard. It was about bringing happiness on the pool deck in the evening. And they said, well, they had beautiful handcrafted plateware, beautiful. And I asked the waiter, where does that come? You know, because usually on ships to have beautiful handcrafted plateware, it's unthinkable for so many reasons: practicality, cost, anything that you can think of, hygiene, and so on and so forth. And I said, how did you get this? He said, well, the director of F&B of the company actually lives in New York City, and he found that little shop, like the size of a studio apartment, where this old lady would make those pottery things, and he bought everything for the fleet, and he bought more, which I was like, oh wow, you know, that never happened. That never, on the Carnival owned vessel, I mean, for God's sake, you know, that never happened. And then he was telling me the story, and then he came back to me at the end of the evening, and he said, Mr. Petyt, I forgot to tell you something. I'm like, what? And he said, well, you know, because of this, we're in trouble. And I was like, oh. And he said, yeah, because the lady who produces was old and she died. So what are we going to do, you know? But this shows, to me, it was so heartwarming that all of a sudden, you know, what I remember about this was that old lady in New York. It was that story, that authenticity, that it's, you know, and to me, it was just amazing. It was an amazing story, and it shows back craftsmanship. It's about craftsmanship, you know. And it doesn't have to be Hermes. Again, that's a poor old lady who, if she did not happen to sort of pass by the director of F&B of that cruise line in the middle of New York City, would probably, you know, have done nothing for that. And just because of the audacity of that person and the keen eye for craftsmanship of that director of F&B, he said, I love this, I want this on my ships. And it brought that experience, well, not just because of the plateware and the whole experience, but I told the hotel director on that ship, I said, you know, by far, what you've created here, by far, supersedes even your more, they have 6 restaurants on board. Huh? This was their sort of casual. I say by far, it's better than any of your prestigious restaurants on board, by far. And I remember they served me at some point, there's a type of salad that I love, and they had it on the menu, they served me. I promise, I had tears in my eyes. It was probably the best. It's a Caesar salad. I love Caesar salad. It was the best Caesar salad I've ever had. And it's about, because the guy was not trained for that. The guy was, it comes from your heart. It comes from your hands, you know. And around that pool deck on that ship, they created craftsmanship.
And this is another way to create storytelling, by the way.
Yeah.
By the way.
Now they have to find a new person to make their plateware, but
other ways. I think there are a few more questions.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you both. Thank you, Annalisa. Thank you, Bertrand. It's very interesting. So Tiziana says, do you think that social media and technology will play a role in the shifts you designed?
Oh, no, absolutely. Oh, wow. My God. Yes, absolutely. And again, on 2 levels. First, as I mentioned before, in the way we work. So I mentioned earlier, technology needs to change the way we work so we can focus more on what is important, which is the guest. Technology also in the way we work, if only, as I mentioned before, you know, I don't need to take a flight to go to New York to meet with someone. I can, you know, maybe be more effective. Social media as I said before, you know, there's a need now to connect with your guests, with your clients, right? And it's not just about the point where they actually go into your shop or into your hotel or on board your cruise ship. You know, you need to find ways to constantly engage them and make them connected with you as a person, as a human, you know, share those values. And again, from an explorative point of view, you know, it shouldn't be a way to sell something, you know, because that will not be well perceived. It should be an opportunity for me to explore something. So if you connect with me, make me explore something, make me explore a different world, you know. And that's why I really hope you guys watch this video of Accor Live Limitless, because they do that, you know. And when you talk about social media, this is part of social media in a sense, huh? And they do that very well. And again, you know, I want to be engaged. I don't want social media to push me to buy. I don't want social media to be a marketing tool. I want social media to be a way for me to explore something that you can provide.
Thank you. And which segments, fashion or wines or spirits, hospitality, etc., in luxury, do you think will bounce back sooner than the others?
Which segment will bounce back sooner, you mean?
Than the others in luxury, like, for example, fashion or wines or spirits.
Okay. All right, where's my crystal ball? No, it's difficult. It's difficult to say. I think, you know, I'm gonna give you an answer. Well, I'm gonna give you two answers. First, as a former, you know, I used to work on cruise ships. You realize now I talk a lot about cruise ships. So I used to work a lot on cruise ships. And I said something very often lately. The people that are around me can tell you that we are right now navigating on radar, right? So we're in the middle of the fog. Hopefully the radar works well, so we don't hit other ships. But we don't know. We don't know what's happening. You know, a year from now. We don't know what's happening a month from now, to be honest. So it's a little bit difficult for me to make an assessment as to what's happening. I'm however, going to give you a second answer, which is interesting. And again, going back to the cruise industry. The cruise industry has been probably the industry in the leisure market that has been the most hit by the pandemic. Alors, why? Because for so many reasons, but one of the reasons, you know, for a hotel, it's okay. You know, you don't have your guests. Okay, you close your doors. You send your staff home. You have the value of the asset in a sense that, you know, you need to that is expensive. You need to maintain that. But a cruise ship is a whole different ball game. You know, you have all the logistical aspect. You have now cruise ships that still have, you know, most of their crew on board. They cannot repatriate them. You know, there's a whole also the image, the perception. The industry has been hit so hard by this pandemic that many people are still predicting that the industry as we know it is over, and that they will not recover. They will not get their guests back, and at least for a few years, you know, and that they need to stop building ships, that the ships are too big, that they're going to sell with 50% capacity, and so on and so forth. Now, going back to Carnival Corporation, so Carnival Corporation owns Carnival Cruise Line, and Carnival Cruise Lines this week, actually on Monday, just said, oh, we're going to reopen some cruising in August, right? Which is a little bit, remember, Carnival operates from the US, so US has established a ban on cruising. So it's a little bit ballsy in a sense to say, well, we're going to reoperate cruising from the US in August. It's a big risk. So they said that on Monday, they said, and people were like, good luck, nobody is going to actually book. They had 400% more bookings in 3 days compared to 2019 at the same period. Is it good or not? I don't know. You know, what does it mean? Is it just, you know, I don't know what it means. All we know is, you know, we're predicting that it's not going to come back. Now, Carnival is the first one to reopen bookings. 3 days, 400% compared to last year. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned flexibility, but also in the presentation that heritage is key. Heritage in luxury is synonym to year-established, like history. Right now, businesses that hadn't achieved digital transformation are being pushed so by the situation. However, luxury companies, heritage ones, are known to be slow to adapt, and new emerging luxury brands that are agile and sustainable aligned, making ethical luxury as part of their business model and P&L are becoming popular. Are we going to see changes in the luxury map in the next years? Are the big players being pushed over from these new brands? And are brands like Veja, etc., the new Balenciaga?
Alors, it will go. It's quite possible. It will all go back. Let's go back to a word that I used a little bit earlier, which is creativity. I think the brands that will succeed today, whether they're big or small, whether they have 100 years of history or just a year or even a few months, heritage is also about being able to build a story. And it's not about just necessarily I have heritage in my own story. It's also I have heritage in who I work with, and I think you'll see more of that as well. So don't think necessarily in heritage in terms of, oh, I'm here since 100 years, I have heritage, because yeah, you might be a dinosaur by now, Heritage is about also being able to tell a story, being able to draft, to call upon all the expertise, call upon also your values as a guest, and integrate all of that and build that heritage. The heritage is built today. You construct an heritage. And it's something that, again, it's storytelling. It's about being creative. How do you adjust facts fast? How agile are you in understanding what your guests want? So it's not a matter of you may have companies that are very large and that they're dinosaurs and they will not understand that, and they might lose market share and disappear, or not. Some of them might be, for example, I go back to Hermes. I love Hermes as a customer. They just understand that, in my opinion. They just get it so well, and I think that's why Hermes will thrive,
Luxury event planning was a blooming industry before the pandemic. What do you think will be for this industry post this pandemic?
Alors, event planning has come to a complete standstill. So that's true. It's if you're in event planning today, you're probably. I was saying that the cruise industry was the most hit. I think probably event planning is right there with the cruise industry. But you know what? Very short answer. People will always marry. People will always celebrate. People will always party. So event planning is here to stay. Now event planning is forced down to stop, but you will see, I think event planning is now, people will always marry. I might say, no, I'm not going to marry now because I need to wait until I can actually invite my guests, but event planning is fine.
Yes, so we have 2 more questions, I think. Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you for the webinar. Would the luxury market shift to the local luxury development in terms of supply chain simplification, turn back to the localization, and from personal perspective, also change focus from external expression, like from clothes, for example, to home decor?
Yeah. Alors, it's not just, I go back to the first part of the question, it's not just about luxury. It's true that what this pandemic has shown us is maybe, we don't question globalization. I think for someone to come and say, well, because of the pandemic, we understand that globalization is not a good thing. That's not true, But it is true, however, that this pandemic will change the way we source, the way we produce, the way we And again, we will be creative in finding alternate ways, and maybe to be more a little bit respectful and conscious of. You know, it's interesting. We used to say, well, I'd better produce in China because it will cost me less. And it is so untrue, because it might cost me less to produce in China, yet what is the cost? What is the impact of transportation, of the logistics, of everything else? Time is also something that is important. These all come at a cost, and we never if you look at a financial statement, they will just look at, well, it costs me less to produce there. But that is so much losing. It's only part of an equation. I think people will be aware of the fact that today, well, no, I'm looking at the entire equation. And when I look at the entire equation, yeah, it makes more sense to produce here. And it's also because going back to authenticity, going back to heritage, and remember the example I gave you about the CEO of Hermes. He also said something very interesting. During the interview, they asked him, they said, well, would you produce somewhere else? And he had an interesting answer. He said, I have nothing against producing somewhere else. It's not about that. But I just find that if I produce here, they know better. I can train them. I know there's, again, he goes back to this heritage. But he also said, the day someone somewhere else shows me that they can do the same job, why not? So I think people will look more at that. They will look more as what makes sense. But again, not just from a cost perspective. Today we look at cost. It's cheaper to make it in China. Whereas today people will look at the global perspective. Yeah, maybe it's cheaper to make it in China, still could be, but what are the other costs, the other impacts? And then maybe I reach a decision that it makes more sense to produce in France or in Italy. Right?
Yes, thank you. We have just one last question from Chiara, who is calling a surprise luxury travel agency. She says, we have always believed that travel can be more than just an industry. That's why we offer experiential travel to build relationships and find new ways of changing worlds. Would you say that the new luxury will be more around feeling part of a community that actually does something good in the destination? Biodiversity project, community project, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is what I mean. But when I say also exploration is, yeah, it will be community based. There was. Alors, I give you an example. A few 3 or 4 years ago. 4 years ago, a new cruise line was born, which is called Fathom, Fathom. And the whole concept about that cruise line, they had only one ship. Was that you come on board, you buy your cruise completely the same way you would buy any other cruise, except that instead of having entertainment on board, instead of having shore excursions when you go to different ports, we'll take you to some places where we'll do community help, community work, right? So it was a way for guests to be involved into community work, and the lectures were about preparing the guests to, what they will encounter when they go to the next port, how they can help the local communities, what they're going to do, and so on and so forth. I think about the cruise line today, unfortunately, disappeared for one reason. Sorry, it's because it was owned by Carnival. So Carnival said, well, not enough revenue in that. And I think they were a little bit ahead of their times. But today, I think this is the kind of product that people will actually enjoy, because again, this is purely, I'm going to explore. It's not just an experience. I'm not passive. I'm not passively experiencing something. I'm actively exploring. I'm actively learning. I'm actively making an impact. And this is, unfortunately, this cruise line went down. But again, I actually thought that it was going to bloom, but I think it went down just because of someone in the corporate headquarters sits down and says, well, I have a ship that makes that revenue, and if I send that ship doing community work, well, the revenue is half. So the shareholders say, well, no, you have to go back, and they transfer the ship back into the regular fleet. But in terms of concept, you know, if we look at people that will have the vision to sustain such a product, it's a product that will absolutely respond to what we want, especially after what happened with the pandemic. So absolutely. And again, it's about exploration. It's about community. I want to be with the people that I sort of interact. And remember what I said also about the hotel. I think I gave the example of Mama Shelter and Virgin, where you know that the people that greet you, that serve you in the hotel, they are like you. They're the same tribe. They use the word tribe. I'm the same tribe. You know, we belong to the same tribe. And I think that will be very strong.
Okay. Last question, I promise. Will there be a change in delivery in luxury goods, particularly online purchases?
Alors, yeah, I think we mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think clearly, online purchasing was a little bit the star of the game in the past few weeks. But I also believe, to be honest, and it's probably here to stay. I'm not saying, you know, it's probably here to stay. But I also believe that people are attached to, you know, the human interaction too, especially when you talk about artisanship. Or remember the story I told you about the person who makes those potteries that were sent on board the seaborne ship. You know, I want more than just to buy the pottery. I want you, the artisan. I want the experience of the shop. I want the experience of. It's not just a product anymore. If it's just about the product anymore, yeah, of course you buy it online, right? And you'll get the right product at the right price, and that will probably increase because of what happened. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that I'd rather explore the opportunity of making you go through such an experience of artisan that you will even forget about the product. You will just relate to me. You will relate to my values, to what I created, to my skills, to my talent, to what I told you. And that is a little bit more difficult to do online. It's possible. You see some efforts, and probably with technology it will happen at some point. I don't know, but human touch is very important.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think it's time to close this session. Actually, we are running 35 minutes late, because actually, thank you for all of your questions to all attendees. Actually, I see that there are some more questions, but I'm sure that if you want to connect with Bertrand via LinkedIn.
Alors maybe, yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also look on YouTube. You enter Vitruvius Partners Group on YouTube. You will see our little videos, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Bertrand Petyt. And if you want to connect, it would be my great pleasure.
Yes, thank you, really, Bertrand, because it was very authentic, your speech, especially because I know you so well. So actually, you really put the heart in this kind of conversations with my students. So I can imagine with the entire audience that is with us today. So I would like to give to all of you guys the next appointment, that is for May 18th. Alessandro Brun, are you with us? Ale, sei con noi?
Yes, I'm here.
Actually, because I think it's while thanking, say thank you to Bertrand to be the first guest of this series. Now I leave the word to who will be the next guest speaker in next week. Ciao, Alessandro.
Yeah. So, thanks, Bertrand, for the very interesting presentation, and everybody for the interesting questions. It was the first attempt, so I ask pardon to all people attending for the slight delay and the video, but I'm sure we are going to improve. So, thanks, Annalisa, for bringing this up, and see everybody next week.
So we will send you. What's the topic of next session, Ale?
Next week, we delve into sustainability. Why and how customers and markets will require more sustainability, and more responsible luxury after the COVID.
Yeah. Okay. So guys, we will send you the information as usual. And so we will post the link, the open link to everybody on LinkedIn, because I think it's easier. But so right now I greet you all, and then Bertrand, a big kiss. Alessandro, thanks to you as well. And then we can also share the recorded session with all of you guys. So if you want, you can request the live, and so you can listen to it again, especially if you miss something. See you next week.
Okay. Thank you. See you soon. Bye bye.
Ciao. Ciao. Ciao.